So let's look at some examples of how to actually work with maps, because that usually makes things a lot more clear. And there's always the Go by Example website, which is great, just like, oh, how do maps work? And then you can kind of like zoom in and real quickly see, okay, this guy's saying I use make, map, string, int, gives me my map, and then I give it a key value, so that's a string, needs to be a string because I defined that there. And then I set it to 7, and I set this second key to 13. And if I print my map, right, so here I'm just using print line, I'm just saying, hey, this is my map. I'm just putting a string there to let people know it's my map, and then printing the whole map out. Then I'll print out this value. K1 is 7, K2 is 13. So these are key value pairs, right? And you can kind of see here, this is how, this person is doing it. And then, assigning a value to V1, right? Just getting the value out and assigning it to another variable and printing the length of the map. And then deleting from a map, so delete and, my map and delete this key. And then, when I've done that, map will now no longer have, the key was K2, so now I only have K1 in there, and then what's the next deal here? Then M at K2, and then doing PRS, and PRS is false. I don't know what PRS stands for. Print line PRS, M at K2. That's like the comma OK idiom, right? But K2 should be there, so I don't know why that's not running. Let's go look at this over, and that's kind of cool. You could click this right here, and it takes you to the Go playground. And so here we make the map. Let's get rid of all this stuff and get rid of all the comments, right? So it's just kind of fun just to do things a little bit different, and then we set some values in there, right? And then we come down here and we print the whole map. I don't think we need that line anymore. And then we get a value and assign it to V1. We don't need that. And then we get the length. And then we delete, so we definitely want to delete. And after we've deleted, we print the map again. And the optional second return value when getting a value from a map indicates if the key was present in the map. This can be used to disambiguate between missing keys and keys with zero values like 0, Here we didn't need the value itself, so we ignored it with a blank identifier, right? So here this is often the comma OK, and you can leave it PRS. We'll leave it PRS just to run it. And it's often the common OK idiom. And so let's just get that out of there and run it with the comma OK idiom. That's the name of it. So format everything and run. And PRS is false. MK2, because we deleted K2. I don't know why I was getting that screwy in my head. So if this was OK, if that was K1, right, then that's OK. And often that's OK is what you see. So that would be more idiomatic. I have no idea what PRS, present, that's what the person is saying, is what that is. So there, is it okay? It's okay. Right? Is this okay? Is it okay? It's okay. So that's a comma OK idiom. You could test, is a value there? And then if it's there, you could get the value out. Right? So I could print the value also right there. 7, the value is 7 for K1. K2 is gone. So if we do K2, I wonder if this will throw an error since I'm trying to print something which, puts it to 0 value, 0, right? Try to get out an int. There is no int, 0 value. So that's like the basics of maps. And let's just see if there's anything else at, Go by Example. I guess we have to go back to that. I don't need that page anymore, I don't think. Well, there's that one last line. I actually just copied it to the clipboard, so we'll put it in. You can also declare and initialize a new map in the same line with this syntax. So that's using map, string, int, and that's a composite literal. And so we saw something really similar with slices. So there's a composite literal. And so instead of doing make and then doing this way, you could leave out make, and you could use this composite literal and just put the values right in there. So a couple things to note about maps. You give it the key and the value when you declare the map, right? Like, hey, this is the key. It's going to be a string. You give it the type. And that's the key type, and this is the element type. I think that's the way the docs refer to it. So give it the key, like what type is the key, what type is the value, and then you just, say, just like with slices, we are index accessing by ints, right? Just like that's the zero-base index and 0, 1, 2, 3 with slices. Here, the key is anything, and so it could be any type, right? So this time we've chosen to make it a string. So we give it the key, and then we assign a value, and then that's just all stored for us. All right, so the thing to know about maps is, again, they're not ordered. and so they could come out in any order. We saw that last time. And yeah, that's the basics of how a map works. I've got a bunch of examples for my own code here that you could download. And one of the things you should really start thinking about, all right, so we just saw how maps work, but one of the things you really start thinking about is this entire idea of maps being reference types. So we saw that slices were reference types. And because a slice is a reference type, if you declare it just, like, hey, var student slice string, well, that's going to be nil, right? Because it never did the make. It never had initialization where it was forced to make it. So here we did it with make, and it makes it. We tell it, make the underlying array, by giving it length and capacity. And when you pass in one argument to slice, right there, it's both length and capacity. I could have also done just length and capacity that way. Sorry, wrong key. And but it's telling the program, go make it that underlying array, right? And so that underlying array got made when we use make. And the underlying array gets made when we use, this, so an empty composite literal, right? It's like, oh, okay, and it makes an underlying array. It's of length 0, but that array got made, right? So we can now start appending into it, right? Here, that array did not get made. The underlying array did not get made, and so when we ask for, hey, is student equal to nil? Yeah, student's equal to nil. But we could still append to it from this point, right? So I could still append. I could do student is equal to append to student, and I'm storing a string, Todd, right? And so that should be all good. So let's just check that, because the proof's in the pudding, and we are in what, 1812. Which one is this? 1812.2. All right, so I got to go up a couple of levels. And change directories into 1812.02. Go run main. We should see my name. Am I on the right one? I asked to print students. There we go. So there's my name. So I could do the append. But the thing to remember is just like, oh, if I do it in this one way, it's nil. And if you're not totally like cementing that in your head, that's okay. I'm just reviewing it so that it does eventually get in there. And you'll need to kind of think about that at times when you're programming. So this is how we saw it with a slice. And let me just change this back. There we go. So that's how we saw it with the slice. And you should think about maps in the same way, right? Like, what are the different ways I could sort of initialize and declare and initialize a map? And so we saw with the slice, if we just did this, we're getting a nil reference, right? But if we did the composite literal, even if it's empty, or if we did make, okay, then it's no longer a nil reference. That was with a slice. And let's take a look, and I'll also leave these up right here so we remember shorthand, just var and make. And let's take a look at doing it with a map. And so here's var my greeting equals make map string. So it's a map with a key of a string and a value of a string. And I'm using var, and that's fine. And my greeting, is the variable, and declaring it to a value of a map that has a key of string and a value of string. And then I'm assigning values. Like, that's all good. If I was to do this, just var my greeting map, right? There is no append function which will get me out of that hole. So I don't know if there's ever an instance where you do something like this, because that will create a nil reference. And I've never seen that. I've never seen an append function. I maybe don't know everything. Obviously, I'm only so far in on this language myself. I didn't create the code, but you would never do this with a map. That's my take. maybe there's something that that I don't, in which case just send me a message, but you never do that, because now my map is nil, right? And I don't have an append function to start appending to that. I only know how to put things into a map by saying, here's the key, here's the value, right? And I've looked around, is there an append function like within a slice where you could have a nil slice and then kind of bring it to life with append? And I didn't see one. So I know I'm just sort of like rambling about like some of the nuances of the language, but this would not be a way that you would say, I want to use a map, because that's going to give me a nil. And I don't have a way to get out of a nil that I've ever seen with a map. So if you do know a way, or if you find a way, go research it, email me, and I'll totally fix this video. But you never do that with a map. But you can totally do, just like, let's see that run, you know, out of curiosity. Bump, 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 bump. I can't type this morning. And that's in 19 and 00. And go run main. Kapow! Right? Assignment and entry nil map. Right? So I've got a nil map. If I was to test it, I could test that. And I don't know. Just comment those out for a second. And my greeting equal nil. That's fine. True. Right? So I've got a nil map. Because I just said, you know, here's my variable and it's a map. I didn't use the composite literal, even with nothing. Var my greeting is equal to, there we go, that's what I want. Kapow. So now it's false. It's no longer nil, which means I could probably do this. And I can put stuff in it because it's no longer nil. And I got false, but I need to print it out to see what's going on. So let's print that out. All right. So if you need to pause the video, just sort of look at the code and look at the results. That's always something good. If I'm like clicking along too fast and you're like, wait, I want to read the code, quit talking. Well, pause the video and I'll stop. Right? But here, you know, I've said, all right, my map, and I used the composite literal. Awesome, right? And now I could start putting things in there like that. And it's obviously no longer nil, so I could take that out. And so that's the composite literal. And, you know, before, what did this code look like? I need make, and I could do it like this too. So those are the two ways, right? And let's just make sure that runs. Lovely, totally running, right? And I've got both those values in there, and it no longer says. So I could do it that way, or I could do it this way. Right? So I could use a composite literal, even if it's empty, and that'll make my map. There we go, my map just got made. Or I could say, you know what, baby? And I don't know if you knew this yet, but the Go compiler and the Go SDK, when you're working and it's late at night and you're by yourself and, you know, your wife's in bed, the Go compiler's baby. Come on, baby. You know what, baby? Well, you gonna run for me? Come on, baby. I don't know. Maybe that's not an appropriate comment. I don't mean it to be the way my mind just went with it. I just keep digging the hole like it's, you know, some other romantic interest. But in a way, weirdly, it is. It is, right? Like, you know, I've got this other interest. It's not romantic, but it's, man, it takes up a lot of time sometimes. All right, so that's making a map. And to get out of this other weird tangent, right, we could do it with make, and that totally works. And we could use, you know, the composite literal, even if it's empty, that totally works. But if we just do, hey, var my greeting of this type, you now have a nil reference. And with a slice, you could get out of that by using append. Stick something in there. With a map, I don't know. I've never seen append. So, you know, I'll update this video if you come across something different than me. But that's what I know of maps so far. So the rest of the examples here, let me just put this one back to the way I want it for this one, which is make. So there's the make one, right? And that's 00 right here, 00. And again, what we were just looking at, you know, and this is important because when you get into programming, you want to be like, yo, man, that's a reference type. Slice, that's a reference type. Map, that's a reference type. You don't take the address of those. They're already pointing to something. They are already a pointer, right? You want to know that. Slice and maps are reference types. Don't take the address of them. They are already addresses pointing to, you know, some other location. That's what they're holding. And you'll want to know that, like, oh yeah, no, slice, you could do it this way, you could do it this way, you could do it this way, right? You could do it the var, my greeting, slice int, cool. And then I could use append because that gave me a nil, or I could do make, or I could use a struct, composite literal, right? Like that all works, and I totally understand how those different methods work. So, you know, those were the ways we looked at it with a slice. Right? You want to know that stuff. So here's the make one, right? We're in map, make, map right there. So we did it var my greeting map, and we could just like take away the var and put in the colon there and make it shorthand. So that's the exact same thing. We took away the var, just put in the colon, exact same code, right? Bonjour, bonjour, my greeting, my greeting. All we did was take away var and put in the shorthand. And then we could also do this where we, again, composite literal. Why composite literal? I think I might have already said this at some point, maybe in this video. If I did, forgive me. But it's literal values. Here are some literal values. So they're literals. And it's composite, so it's composed of a couple of different values. So even if there's no values in there, we call it a composite literal because it can have values, right? And so that's a composite literal. That totally works, right? And then here's how we'd add an entry. So Tim and Jenny are keys with these values. Now we have Harleen, that key with this value, right? So that's how we'd add an entry, just my map, give it, at this key, give it this value. And then we can take the length of a map, and the map will just grow and shrink as you use it. You don't have to worry about it. And then you can update an entry with a map. And like I said, like with an array, a slice, underlying a slice is an array. Under a map is a hash table. And so it's a little bit more complex. So we'll look at what a hash table is later, and you'll learn how to do a hash table. I'm going to teach you that because that's something you should know, and it's awesome. So here's how you'd update an entry. So this map, right, at this key, give it this value. And then if you want to update that, you just say, hey, at this key, the value is now this. And that totally works. And then here's how you delete an entry, right? And we saw this over at Go by Example. And I'm sorry, it's such a long video. But it's like, here's all the content. Man, you got to know these things about a map. And so here's delete, and then from this map. And here I'm using an int. Maybe it's a little bit confusing, right? I used an int as a key. And so don't freak out about that. It's just it could have been a string, whatever, right? Maybe I'll change that. I'll just make this a string, and I can make this 0 and 1 and 2 and 3, and then I want to delete 2. And when I run that, what file am I in? 06. Change directories. 06, go run main. And so 2, 3, 0, 1, 3, 0, 1, right? So that's interesting. Just here we see sort of order being, not the same order they got put in. But 3, 0, 1, we got rid of 2. So that's how you delete. And then here's that comma OK idiom, which we saw in the other example, like, does the value exist? So let's just see that run. And then we'll call it quits on this video, and we will all go have a beer or, a beverage of your choosing. All right, so here is 07. Did I do go run main? There we go. So value Buenos Dias exists, true, right? And then map and value. All right, so let's see what's happening. Print line my greeting. So it prints out my entire map. I wish I could clear out this terminal. Here we go. Now run it. There we go. So it prints out my entire map. There's my entire map. And then my greeting too, val exists. And this is like all on the same line. So that's cool to see. That's new for us, right? Where I did the entire check right here as a statement. And then the scope of val and exists is only in this if block right there, right? And sorry, the if block goes all the way to here. And just checking that, the else. And so that it limits the scope by having that right there as opposed to having it up at the package level or the func level, next level up. And so I put that on that, and then I could check exists. And so if that exists, then I could print, right? I could print out the value, val exists. And if it doesn't exist, I could then print, the value doesn't exist and see what the value is. And then, I could print my whole map. So let's take a look at that, right? So here we had the whole map, and then value Buenos Dias exists true, and I print the whole map again, and that's 0, 1, 3, 0, 1, 3, and I deleted from my greeting 2, right? And so if I don't know why that's right there. Let me take this up. So now I can put this here. There we go. So let's look at that now. So that value doesn't exist. Val doesn't exist. And if I comment this out, this is a much better example. I'm glad we went through it. And then Buenos Dias, right, and true. So the value's there and it exists. And I should put here, duplicate that, and bring it up. That value exists. All right. So hopefully you see what's happening in that code there. All right. So I don't delete it. That value exists. Here's the value, and exists is true. And then if I do delete it, that value doesn't exist, right? So that's how that is working with that comma OK idiom, and we'll see that in the docs, which we're going to look at next. So that's a lot about maps. That's a lot about maps. And I gave it to you all in one big video because it's hard to break up for me and just like, here's a little piece, here's a little piece, here's a little piece. But just a little bit of a review of the concepts because that was a lot. And you hung in there with me, and it's almost beverage time, whatever beverage you choose, right? But, you know, don't use var my greeting and then type like this. That's going to get you in trouble. I don't know how to get out of that hole, right? So there's no pen like with slices. And the two ways you do it would be like, you know, you'd make your map like this, and that will totally work. So I'm just making sure I have the right parens right there. Or you'd use the shorthand notation to make your map like that, right? So that's another way you do it. Or you'd have, and then take away right there, that, and then that would totally work right there, right? So that's another way you do it. So those are the three ways. You got that way right there, right? Or you have the make way right here. So that's the make way. And then before you had this way, which is the empty composite literal, right? But you would not do, you know, the var way right here. And then I'm just going to set this back to the way it was. So you want to do that. I'm going to set it back to the way it was, which is var my greeting, and I'm doing make map string. And always test your code, make sure it works. Make sure I'm not overlooking anything. Totally works. All right, so that's like one way you make maps. And another thing is just thinking about reference types. Maps and slices are both reference types, and a map, you know, is pointing to an underlying data structure. So you wouldn't take an address of it because it's already a pointer. It's already just holding an address. That's all it is. That's a lot about maps. All right, but I think you're probably a lot more familiarized with them after all this. So awesome for you for hanging in and watching it all, even though it was a long video.